Over 95% of all charity is people giving money to their favorite churches, synagogues, symphony halls, opera houses, and universities. But Bill Gates is giving most of his money to save the lives of the world's poorest people. It is a decision premised on the idea that all human beings are created equal and that all human life should be valued equally. Listen to Gates on this. At a personal level, one of the decisions you've made is not to leave enormous amounts of money to your children. Are they old enough to understand this yet?
Well, I'm sure I'll get more flack as they get older, but I don't think it would be beneficial to them to have huge amounts of wealth. I think that's very distortive in terms of how you think of what the impact you're going to have, how you measure yourself, how your friends think about you and how they do things with you. And it's also bad for society. Warren Buffett says that we could pick our Olympic team by picking the grandchildren of the 1900 Olympic team, and we could see how that would work. In a sense, if we have so much inherited wealth, particularly these very large fortunes, we're actually doing that. We're picking the grandchildren of the people whose skill and luck accumulated that money and saying to them they should have this vast control of society's resources. I just don't think that's a great way to run a society. And so
you're in favor of the inheritance tax?
I'm in favor of two things. I'm in favor of people who are lucky enough to have these resources thinking about how either they or somebody they back should give the money back to society. And so if you give money away, then you don't even get into the taxation issue. If you don't give it away, yes, I think some portion of it ought to be taxed, that there'd be an estate tax. After all, the creation of that fortune depended on the government's educational system, justice system. It wasn't something where you just went off on your own and magically, pulled some gold out of the ground. You, in particular, my case is a clear one. I'm a beneficiary of an educational system and a system of stability and incentives where I got to hire bright people and come up with products. And the fact I was 19 years old, that didn't matter. If I had a good piece of software, somebody could buy it from me. I was just there to innovate. And that kind of society is where the opportunity for those great fortunes come from.
You're going to give away almost all your money. You're going to give away almost all Warren Buffett's money. That's collectively tens of billions of dollars. You've chosen something very unusual. 98% of the philanthropists in the United States give the money in America essentially to Americans. You chose not to do that. Why?
If you look and say, where is the greatest inequity, you have to take a global view of that. I mean, America stands for a lot of things. It stands for the innovation that a capitalistic society can drive. It stands for political freedom, but it also stands for ending inequity. And over the decades, the inequities against women or various religions or races, America's made a lot of progress. And so I think we can say today that the global economic inequity is the greatest one left and probably the hardest one to make progress on. So I think it makes sense, since the U.S. benefits from the world market, for people who give back to certainly give some in the country. Over a quarter of what we do is focused on helping to improve education in the United States, but the bulk of it goes to where a dollar can save a life most effectively. And we know that if you start to improve health and help people out who are poor, you can get that society into a situation where it's self-sufficient, where the population growth goes down, where the agricultural productivity goes up, the educational achievement goes up. And we have this incredible good news story where the old divide of the rich and the developing world is a misleading dichotomy now, because that developing world, although it was once really bimodal, rich and developing, now across the whole spectrum, we have countries like China or Mexico or Brazil that have done so well, and then we have some like Yemen or Central African Republic, a lot of them in sub-Saharan Africa, that are still really down at the bottom and haven't gotten going. And so the capitalistic approaches, scientific innovation, decent governance, those things have been proven out in most of the world, and we should want to help the countries that have got tough situations to help them get on that same track.
I know you've read the book The Bottom Billion by Paul Collier, and he talks about the bottom billion of the world trapped in about 50 countries that are just not reforming, that are not getting their act together in various ways. Does it make sense to give money to those governments to try to reform those educational systems or health systems?
Well, the most exciting thing I learned when I was just getting into philanthropy was that if you reduce childhood deaths, if you improve health in a society, that surprisingly population growth goes down. And that's because a parent needs to have some children survive into adulthood to take care of them when they're old. And so they think having 6 children is what they need to do to have at least 2 survive. That's what they'll do. And amazingly, across the entire world, as health improves, then the population growth actually is reduced. And there's a miracle intervention, which is vaccines. In 1960, over 20 million children died. In 2005, less than 10 million died, and that's despite a much larger global population. That is huge progress, and a lot of that is because these vaccinations are being given broadly. Over half of that improvement, another part is from economic development. And so even in the poorest countries, we should go in and give them a malaria vaccine and give them vaccines for diarrheal diseases. And if a mother wants to limit her family size, give her the tools that let her have that possibility. So I think we owe it even to the poorest billion to give them a chance.
But you're giving them, in effect, a one-shot. You're kind of getting in there, doing the vaccine and leaving, rather than trying to interact and reform the very broken, corrupt, dysfunctional political and governance system in order to try and raise their general standard of living.
Well, you want to, all these interventions are important because they kind of go together. Poor countries generally have bad governance, countries with lots of sickness, countries with high population growth. All these things go together. Every one of those countries that are cited as being in the bottom billion have mostly bad governance, high population growth, terrible health statistics, low education achievement, very poor agricultural productivity. And it turns out that if you can improve any one of those, it helps the other. So amazingly, you can improve health in a country and the governance will get better.